All right, time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France. I'm joined in the studio by Florence Villeminot. Good to have you as ever. We're going to focus on a symbolic change, if you will, to the French language. It's really been getting a great deal of attention, Flo.
Well, if you're learning French, you'll be familiar with the fact that French is a tricky language. Now, on top of the complicated grammar, there is the masculine and the feminine, which is so confusing. Now, up until now, job titles have been mostly automatically masculine, except for a few notable exceptions, for instance, the word infirmière, which is a nurse. Now, for years, critics had said, well, this is sexist, and there have been calls for change. And the truth is, though, for many years, people have kind of been feminizing some professions kind of informally. For instance, you'll say there's a boulangère, which is a baker, or an avocat for a lawyer. But this practice didn't have the official stamp of approval from the guard dog of the French language, the Académie française, which we've already explored on this show. Well, after years of hesitation and reticence, the immortals, that's the members of the Academy, they actually decided to approve a report that was advocating the feminization of working titles.
Right, well, for those outside of France, perhaps it might seem trivial, but it's actually a linguistic revolution. Walk us through some of the changes that we can expect when it comes to this kind of historic turnaround.
Well, let's take a look at some examples, for instance. Let's take a look at the word professor. So in the masculine version is professeur. Well, the feminine, professeur with an E. A rabbin, which is a rabbi, becomes rabbine with an E. Écrivain, a writer, écrivaine with an E. But it's a lot more complicated than just adding an E at the end of these words. Let's take a look at another example. The word chef, which is a boss or a manager. Well, there's several ways to feminize this word. It can be chef, chefesse, cheftaine, or chev. That's another option. And what will the option be in the end? Well, the Academy has already said it's not the language police, and so it's not going to be publishing an official list. It's up to the public to decide. But that can be tricky for some jobs. For instance, the sapeur-pompier, the firefighter. There are several ways to feminize this word as well, and it can be a real tongue twister.
Sapeur-pompière. Saprice et pompière.
Sapeuse-pompière.
All right, well, change is a complex thing in France, but it's especially true when it comes to the French language, which is a particularly touchy subject, Flo.
Well, some people are very protective of what they see as the sacred French language. They're afraid that it will become ugly or less sophisticated, and others are opposed to change for different reasons. They see it as kind of a top-down decision that's coming from the elitist Académie française. They wear these green suits. They have a ceremonial sword to protect the French language with. They're seen as being a little bit disconnected from the everyday man or woman here in France. Must be said, though, a lot of people do applaud the Academy's decision and say it's about time that language caught up with the evolution of society. But it must be said, it's a mixed bag.
Men already get everything, so it'd be a nice change to have some feminine.
It doesn't work in terms of expression, language. It's ugly.
Why should it be masculine if women do the job? It's normal to change.
It's weird because I'm not used to it, but why not? I don't mind. I'm ready to make an effort.
When you feminize it, it's a sign of respect for the woman in front of you.
It's ridiculous. It may be because I'm not used to it, but I don't think it's pretty. I don't like it.
It's clearly going to take some time to get used to, but what's ironic is that actually, if you look at French history, it was actually common practice to use the feminine version of job titles. For instance, doctoresse for doctor. That is until the mid-17th century when the Académie française essentially shot down that idea.
Well, staying with the Académie française, they fiercely clamped down on another attempt to make the French language kind of more female-friendly, but this time it was in writing.
And actually that leads to our expression du jour, an expression du jour, which is écriture inclusive. Now, this is something that you hear a lot in France. Essentially, it's a gender-neutral way of writing France, because as it stands, the rule in France is that le masculin l'emporte sur le féminin, masculine beats feminine. This is a rule that all little French kids learn in school, and that means that a mixed gender group will always be masculine so long as there is one masculine element. Now, some people say this is implicitly sexist, and it should change.
When you say 300 little girls and a cat arrived, we shouldn't have to make it masculine just because there is one cat and cat is masculine. If there are 300 little girls, that's enough. It should be feminine.
Right, so Flo, tell us, what does this écriture inclusive actually look like?
Well, let's take a look at another example. Let's take the word lecteur, a reader. You can say un lecteur for a male reader, une lectrice for a female reader. If you talk about a group, for now, it's les lecteurs, so masculine. Écriture inclusive would be les lecteurs ris S. So you can see that you're using a dot there to show that it can be masculine and feminine. Now, this form of writing, which is a little bit clunky, has been used in higher education for years. And a few years ago, though, it came to the public forefront when it was used in a school manual, and there were calls to use it in state documents. And guess what? It sparked a very, very impassioned debate once again.
Here's the word scientist, written in the inclusive way. Imagine children, boys and girls, if from the beginning they could see this kind of writing, it could help them project themselves towards a scientific career.
It's part of the essence of the language that the masculine is the neutral form. That's why we say the museum of man. It's of course the museum of men and women. Adding the feminine is redundant. The masculine is enough.
Now, according to polls, 75% of French people actually support this écriture inclusive, but it has a long way to go before it gets the green light from the Académie française. Now, whether it's the debate about this inclusive writing or feminizing job titles, one thing is clear is that the French language, which is spoken by some 275 million people around the world, well, this French language is definitely a living language, and it's definitely alive and kicking.
Alive and kicking, and looks like it's heading in the right direction as well, Flo. All right, thank you very much. That's all we have time for. In the meantime, if you do want to tweet your questions, you can go to @FloVilmino. You can also check out our website at france24.com.